community can change the world. How AI is causing a disparity in society and what we can do about it. We're going to talk about this and so much more today with David Barrow from the UK. David, let's get into it.
Man, thank you.
Be the superhero of your organization. Unleash your IT powers at HDI Service and Support World, May 3rd to 7th in Las Vegas. Dive into actionable insights, cutting-edge training, and unbeatable networking. From solving today's challenges to shaping the future of service and support, this is your chance to make IT legendary. Suit up and save big with $500 off using code BANTER500 on HDIconference.com.
On today's episode of Bites and Banter, we're joined by David Barrow, ITIL 4 master, service management expert, a investor in organizations and their leadership and their people. Been doing it for 30 years. How you doing, David?
Hi there, Rocky, and thank you. Thank you for having me, and what a wonderful introduction. I appreciate it.
Did I get that timeline right? 30 years? I know it's 20 plus.
Unfortunately, although the top of the head suggests not, the beard suggests so, it is more than 30 years now, but I declare it as both boy and man. So
I love
I
it.
started in this game young.
And you, David, you've been around for a while. You're involved in frameworks. You were around from ITIL 3, ITIL 4, and now we have ITIL 5. And you just do a lot in this industry. But there are people in our HCI audience who are going to be listening to this who maybe haven't met you. Maybe they haven't had the luxury of attending a webinar or getting to meet you in person at SITS or, one of the UK-based conferences. Can you introduce yourself, tell our audience a little bit about your background? How did you find yourself in this world of IT, service management, organization, consulting? Just walk us through, where did it start? What was that journey that led you to where you're at today?
Cool, thank you. I'll try and compress 30 years into a minute or so, shall I? So I guess it all started by accident. That's the truth. Here in the UK, your first opportunity to leave school is around the age of 16, and I absolutely took that opportunity with both hands. Couldn't wait to get out of education. And there's various reasons for that. We could talk about those another day. And I ended up, purely by accident, working for a company, a really small company, that asked me a question at a mock interview. And the question was, can you build a PC? This is in the mid to late 90s. And I said yes, with no real idea as to whether I could actually build a PC. Luckily, back then it was quite easy. Motherboard, a few bits and bobs, plug it all in, and away you go. So I got the job. And then since then, it's kind of just been this trajectory of change and growth, because I'm really fortunate that the internet has been invented. People have had a much greater need for IT and computing and so on. And so through working through organizations like IBM, where I learnt so much about what's good and what good looks like, and that was my first experience of ITIL with V2. I've worked with IBM, I've worked in investment banking, I've worked for outsourcing suppliers globally. And then about 10 years ago, I set up my own consulting business where I wanted to take everything I'd learned in those organizations, good and bad, and help other organizations not repeat the bad and hopefully repeat the good. And in doing so, I've also found myself really privileged to be able to then open myself up to public speaking, writing books, working on standards, and just generally growing with the industry. And I'm at a phase now where I'm really intent on giving something back in many ways, shapes and form.
And David, you're someone I think who's known for that very thing, right? Giving back in various ways. And as you've worked with organizations, when we were talking a little bit, you really highlighted something that I hadn't thought about. And I think it's something that is worth hearing kind of your thoughts on what you're seeing. But with the boom of AI, right, and the advancement of AI, and it's everywhere. It's embedded in our smartphones. It's embedded in our applications. It's, sometimes it's more successful than others, right? Everybody's selling it and everybody's talking about it. but you highlighted something that I think is so important, and that's just the divide that AI is creating. And can you
Yeah.
kind of flesh that out a little bit for me?
I honestly feel it's something that we're sleepwalking into. We don't even know we're doing it in some cases. And what I mean by that is, you said it just really appropriately a moment ago, Rocky, as you introducing the question. You say something that we have on our smartphones. Well, we don't all have smartphones, unfortunately. Um, Here in the UK, for example, and this is a true statistic, 26% of households are reconsidering what they can afford when it comes to what is now considered the utilities of gas, electricity, water, and internet. Internet is now a utility. Used to
Mm.
be something we dream of having, now it's just there. But it isn't there for 26% of households who are now choosing to get rid of it because they can't afford to maintain those four things. And so I think we're creating this socioeconomic divide through the use of AI, and we're doing it in some cases unintentionally, but I think there could be an intent there as well. And my worry is that as we move forward, if we don't have standards applied around AI and its usage, and we don't decrease that gap, then we're going to have a generation of young people, not to mention the existing generation, who aren't going to be well versed in using that capability, and they're going to get left behind. And then you've got the skills gap in organisations and the concerns in organisations. So again, here in the UK last year, there was a bit of a survey. 51% of employees from global blue chip organisations, I'm talking your Googles and your Microsofts, were concerned that their jobs were at risk due to AI.
Mm.
And these are the organisations that are working with it. Now, I think, honestly, it creates opportunity as well as creates gaps, but it's how we manage both appropriately that is going to really help individuals and therefore organizations pivot successfully into this brand new age of
Yeah.
AI.
So how do we start really looking at the way we do technology differently to help this divide? Like, what does that look like?
I think we're kind of on the way there. So I think there's two themes I'd like to just go with.
Yeah.
So the first is the theme or way of working, which is that humanization of IT. Now, I feel that's really evolved in the last 5 years. Prior to then, humanizing IT was about delivering IT services that humans could use and could understand and could get along with. And I think we in IT, for all of our great skills and capabilities, the one we sometimes lack is the ability to view things through our customer's lens. You know, the whole
Mm.
concept of outside in thinking isn't something that us IT people are generally, and I'm being quite scathing, very good at. So we've seen that movement grow, humanizing IT. But now we've got to think about the AI. How are we going to humanize the AI so people can exploit it and get the best from it and also close those gaps? And to do that, we need to look at legislation and standards, in my opinion. And there's that old saying that the last thing to keep up with technology is regulation.
Yeah.
The difference is when where that really came from, which was the industrial age, a year was a year in terms of movement, in terms of progression. You know, a year in a factory using technology to deliver goods was a year. Now, with AI, a year can be a day. And so therefore
Mm.
we need to look at how we put together regulation, how we put together standards, and massively speed that up, because we are lagging at such a great rate in those areas. And so I've recently taken on a role with the British Standards Institute, which gives me, I guess, a seat to influence standards at a global level with the UK. And I'm not sure we're going to get there in my lifetime, let alone my tenure. But the point is I think we need to start because we're all already way behind the curve. And so to answer your question, the two ways for me are the humanization of digital technology and AI and the improvement of standards and regulation around that too.
The intentionality that goes into that, right? It's not something that's going to happen on accident.
No.
it, and it just makes me wonder, like, what can organizations or leaders do pre-regulations, right,
Mm,
to help make that technology accessible? And I don't know if there's an answer to that question. I don't know if there's a, a silver bullet, if you will, that solves the problem, and the disparity. And, I think we can sit, I'm sitting right now in a room that's set up differently than it's probably going to be next time we record an episode, because I just
mhm,
got 4 walls built in my basement so that I can have a space because we have a baby on the way. And you know what I'm not worried about? How I'm going to feed that baby. How I'm going to
mm.
put electric in the house and make sure there's lights when we're changing the diapers. And, I don't have to think about internet. And I think it's so easy to sit and do our jobs day in, day out, and not pause and think. There's people who literally do not have the ability to open a computer at home, go to ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini or Perplexity or ABCDEFGAI, right?
Mm.
And just play. And at what level of a disadvantage is that generation, that person, and that kid and that family going to be when they enter the workforce?
Well, if we
And
take your
uh,
scenario, sorry.
yeah, no, it just I'm curious, how do organizations, individuals, how do they help see that problem, address that problem, without waiting for regulations, which, like you
Yeah,
said, take a long time to catch up.
absolutely. So let's start with organizations, and we'll talk about service management in this context if we can. So
Yeah, absolutely.
with organizations, I strongly believe and especially if we're thinking about service management, but at an enterprise level, not just at an IT level, and there's a whole other conversation there, I realize that. Um,
Yeah.
but there are two practices, if done brilliantly, that lift every single other practice, but also lift the organization. They're knowledge management and continual improvement. And so for effective knowledge management, we can start thinking about AI and deployment of agentic AI in terms of knowledge management. Because if your knowledge management is poor, then all you're going to do is speed up the ability to deliver a poor result. Or as we might want to say, you put sticky brown stuff in, you just get it out a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Um, so I've worked recently with organizations where we've seen this. We've seen things that take their employees 27 minutes to do. We've measured it across many people. We've seen this seemingly simple task to go and do something that runs their business take 27 minutes. If we'd have automated that, we could have reduced it to maybe 5, but it still would have delivered the same poor result.
Mm.
So what we do is we break down that knowledge, we understand where the gaps are, we fill the gaps, we put good old service management fundamentals around that, like version control, ownership, last update, next update, review times. Then we turn that 27 minutes into something that's delivered instantly, something that's delivered with ease, and something that you can then begin to deliver at scale in the organization. Because if you take that, do it again, do it again, do it again. And whilst you're doing that, go through their knowledge base and reduce it from 900 to 30, which again is another real case. You've then lifted the organization on the premise that continual improvement will continue the uplift, and continual improvement itself is a culture. So that's the organizational view from my perspective. You can improve your knowledge management process and therefore utilize technology to deliver great results, technology being AI. Then, from the individual perspective, I think there's a few good things there. So if you work for an organization that does that, you are therefore going to be lifted with, although you still may return home and not have what you have at work, which actually is often the flip nowadays. Normally what we get at work is worse than we've got at home. But let's just say you're in that zone.
Yeah.
I think then, and organizations sort of hate me for saying this because it really should be the duty of governments, but they don't do this. Organizations, with the money they save, the productivity they increase, should then be setting aside funding to then go and help in their local area, to help the people of the local area to get what they need to go and do this. And this is just my own kind of
Yeah.
political belief. But it's something that myself and Lucy, who I work with in terms of authoring, we're looking at doing for women who need to get access to technology to do basic things, who want to, help feed their children through online shopping because that's going to save them some time and all that kind of stuff. So I think we will have a personal responsibility to maybe help others if we are privileged. Organizations have a responsibility to help their staff and the local community if they can improve their productivity and therefore improve their bottom line. And then good old service management can help deliver that to the organization through knowledge and continual improvement.
No, that makes sense. Just the intentionality in those things and giving back. And I wish organizations did more to tell stories around what they're doing in their communities, because I do think there are some that are really good at it, right? They're really, really good at it. But I don't think holistically, especially in this service management, IT in general, I don't think organizations do a good enough job talking about how they're being intentional to give back, and highlighting those things would also allow us to spend our dollars where organizations are supporting things that we care about, right? Because even though
Exactly.
I don't know that everybody realizes it, or I don't know if organizations, I'm sure there's a lot of research, and there's a lot of dialogue at certain levels in certain organizations, but I think people do spend money where their heart is attached, right? Where there's something I care about. And how you do that effectively, I don't know the answer, but I wish there was more storytelling in those things and giving back so that we knew. And then other organizations get ideas. How do I? Oh, that's a good idea. I should,
Yeah.
support that. And you talked about specifically giving back and supporting women, right, who are looking for this. And you've been nominated and won awards, right, in the UK for your allyship, um, and a part of your journey in giving back, I think, is riddled with just struggle, unexpected struggle. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about how discovering you have cancer, right? And battling through that in the midst of, your career and trying to navigate just that whole situation, how that's impacted the way you look at technology, the way you look at community. I know we didn't prep this specific question we were talking, but I think it's one that has a lot of value just from who you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think if we could begin with community before we get to the other bit. So,
Yeah.
I wrote a book a few years ago called Co-Creating Value in Organizations with ITIL 4. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? So good.
It really rolls off the tongue.
But in that book was kind of built around the work that I'd been part of and done co-creating communities in organizations to deliver results. And we found that things like knowledge, continuing improvement, lifting individuals and therefore lifting the organization was best done by building communities of people in the organization who shared common values, common goals, and even those that didn't, getting those people involved and understanding why they didn't share them. And so the book was kind of centered around that. And I said at a conference 6 years ago now, 6 or 7 years actually, time does fly. I said at that conference, we have conferences and they're incredible. Conferences are brilliant places to go and speak to people, network, face to face, absolutely brilliant. They happen once a year. You might get to 1 or 2 of those. So you might get 2 or 3 a year. Then you've got committees like the ones that I sit on, and they look to make change, but they at best probably meet 4 times a year. But they try to instigate change. But I said the future for me is community of people with similar goals, as I said before, pushing to make something better. And they can meet as often as they want, and they can meet 1-to-1, they can meet 1-to-12, however it is, and start making a difference. And when I said that, what I didn't envisage, if I'm honest, was things then springing up. So here in the UK, the ITSMF has got communities for individuals patriating out of the armed services into service management. They've got a women in ITSM community. They've got service design and transition community. Globally, we've got the SIAM scopism community, we've got the open service community, and I honestly think that these things can make a huge difference. As well as here in the UK, we've got the Read Women in Technology community, which is around giving people, namely women, the opportunities to go and further themselves through mentoring, through coaching, and through working with one another. So that's kind of stuff that I've been doing for the last few years, and why Lucy and I wrote Allyship Actually. It's why we got together, and Lucy told me about her career in our industry, and we were able to see just how linear my career has been and how bumpy hers has been. And the only thing that that separates the two of us is that she's a woman and I'm a man. So then you mentioned about the diagnosis, the cancer diagnosis. So when that happened, to be perfectly honest, the real truth is I started keeping a diary for me, not for anybody else. It was to help me try and remain sane. It was to help me try and claw back some ownership of my life when it was all kind of being taken out of my hands, in terms of, you will be at this appointment, you will have this surgery, you will have this chemotherapy, and so on. You lose control. So writing gave me some control, writing a diary. But then I popped it into a Substack because it was 2 days before my operation and I needed something to keep the brain ticking. And I thought, could this help people? Even if it doesn't, it's going to help me. And then when I came from that operation, I got lots of feedback as to how it had helped a lady in India that had been looking after her father who was suffering from bowel cancer, another lady that had bowel cancer, a gentleman that had bowel cancer, all this little blog. And it's kind of that then led me to working with my publisher to put the book out there, because the aim is, in a similar way to the other books and the work in service management, is, frankly, I get something from it. There is no disguising that. It gives me a certain pleasure. It gives me something to promote and to get behind, and to really, frankly, expand my horizons and the knowledge that people have. But also it offers support for individuals going through, or supporting somebody going through a diagnosis, and that feels good too. So that's why I do those things. It's not selfless at all. It really is often more for myself than anything else. But if it helps others, all the better.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about community. And I know you're very passionate about community, right? And this whole podcast started because we want to give back to our community and to tell more meaningful stories and give people like you, David, right, a platform to share things that can really impact, others, whether you realize it today. And, Dustin, our Podtext, is our producer for this show, and they do a great job. But he talks about this concept of assets, right? And I think you have a lot of them out there, right? And everything you write and you post, everything you record, and it's online, that's an asset that's out there forever, unless you take it down, hypothetically.
True, yeah.
And the longer it's out there, the more people that see it, the more people it can impact, right? And whether it's a Substack, it's a book, it's a podcast interview, it's a, or it's a HDI local chapters meeting, or it's an OSC call on a Friday, or I think the thing that community has that, and conferences are great. I think conferences are valuable, but to your point, communities can change organizations, can change communities, can change. I mean, if you think about it, can change really anything a lot quicker, a lot more effectively than a conference, unless that conference springboards to more communities. And I think it's because, to your point, you've got people who are getting together and are pouring into each other, who are brainstorming, who are talking about the hard things. Now, what do they do with that? They don't necessarily do something with everything every day, right? But they take that back to their organizations, to their communities, their workplace, and they imply it. And so I think you highlight such a good point of just people can get together as much as they want. And it makes me ask the question, it makes me think, how can organizations, and you talked a little bit about this, but you didn't go deep in the weeds, how can they build community around a shared vision, right? How can they identify, every organization has a mission, but doesn't mean that team that mission might not be real, right, for that team. Yes, it's the organization. Yes, it's what you're contributing to, but like, how can organizations really foster community within the walls or within the remote
Yeah,
walls, whatever, if they're remote, that
it's a
help
great
foster that
question.
change with it where they're at?
It's a really, really good question. And I think you have to kind of start from where it can go wrong before you can talk about where it goes right.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is when I work with organizations in my service management capacity, I'll often sit with people and say, tell me about the vision and mission of the organization. And in some organizations, they will be absolutely spot on, so consistent. It's like they're all reading it from the
yeah,
same hymn sheet.
yeah,
And then I'll say to them, how do you contribute to that vision and mission? And that's where they start to panic a little bit. They don't quite know how they do that. They don't know what value their job's adding, and suddenly they start to question their own role in the organization. And I discovered that a lot in my earlier work. So then when I worked with an organization, I started asking people the question, what does value mean to you in relation to your job and your day to day? What are you getting from this that you couldn't get elsewhere? And I would ask execs that, I would ask people on the ground that, and so on. And suddenly I started to form a picture of the culture of that organization. And the first time I kind of truly discovered that, I kind of put all of those things into a bit of a word cloud and presented them back to the senior leadership of this organization and said, we need to build a community around this. And some of the words that were used were empathy, collaboration. The word value obviously came up, but it came up in different ways in relationships as value, as currency. It came up in trust being a currency and sort of continued improvement being a currency. And so these kind of 5 phrases were added to a slide pack of a small community that was being built. And it's a true story. We started publicizing these slides, talking about what we were doing in terms of a service improvement program. And then literally one day in this massive, massive global organization, I received an instant message saying, you won't believe it, I've seen your slides in Singapore. So for those that don't know, I'm UK based, so Singapore is quite a long way away. And it was kind of put to me in a, how dare they take your slides? Whereas I was really intrigued as to why they would take the slides. And somebody just seen it on a screen. And so I was like, do you know who this person is? Is there any way you can kind of allow me to connect with them? And the answer was yes, I do. And yes, you can. And so when I connected with this person, they basically said to me, well, firstly, we're sorry for nicking your slides. I was like, no, that's not a problem at all. Like, go ahead. But we've done it because the words and those words in the bottom right hand corner, they really mean something. Like, they're exactly what we're trying to do. But they were trying to do it in a completely different department, not in IT. They were doing it in finance. And so I said, would you mind coming along to this community meeting that we hosted to explain this to the community members? And that was what kicked it off. So now we had a community of people that just weren't just IT. We had a member from finance who invited somebody else from finance. Then we discovered it was being used in HR. Then we discovered it was being used in different satellite sites. And we ended up building this community of people that shared vision. And ultimately, coming back to the original point of your question, they all knew what the organization was there to do. They weren't quite sure how they contributed towards it. But now we were able to say, well, they were able to speak to each other. So IT were able to say, this is what we do day to day. We're not locked in a dark room. We do care about you. We do want to make what we do valuable to you. Finance were able to say, we're not just about the money. We're not just about the net spend. HR were able to say, we're not just about the discipline and the holiday allowance, blah, blah, blah. And we were able to figure out what the commonalities were. And that community went on and did incredible things in that organization. And so my belief is that if you can then start to bring that, elevate the organization, but then why can't organizations in the same sector maybe drop being competitors and talk about how they provide value to customers and start doing that themselves? And one of the key messages I'd left out of that original organization is we ended up with a customer of the organization joining the community. And then we were able to start mapping their services from the outside in much more appropriately. And so that was a massive key. So, yeah, I think it's about understanding that we may all work for the same organization, but we're all different people. But there will be some commonalities and there will also be some differences. And how we bring ourselves together with one another to enhance the commonalities and to understand the differences and work through them, that's what a good community can do, and it can achieve so much.
So where do you start? Like, practically speaking, if an organization says, "Hey, David, heard you on Bites and Banter and HDI, and we really want to do this community thing," where would you tell them to start? Like, what does that look like?
I hate to sound too ITIL-esque, but it does work. Start where you are, quite literally, and then use that focus on value. And I did completely nick it from ITIL 4, in fairness, and the guiding principles. But it's genuine. So a much more easier, granular way to answer the question is in the work I do today to day, it starts with an assessment, a series of interviews where you meet with people and you grow to understand what the organization is there to do, what it does well, what the vision is, what the mission is, what the strategy is. Often there isn't one. There is one dressed up as a vision, but there isn't actually a strategy. As an example, an organization should have a top-down strategy, and then every department should understand how they contribute towards that. I don't really think I've seen that in the over 30 years in the 28 industries I've worked in, but I do see elements of. So it begins with that assessment to understand where the strengths are, where the weaknesses are, and then where it really matters is the level of engagement. So again, another true story. I've been engaged by a senior leader who asked us to go to his office to start an assessment, and in the very meeting then said to us, "We don't need an assessment because everything around here is expletive." I was like, "But you invited us." And I put to that individual, it can't be what you're saying it is, because in the nicest possible way, you've got two phones in your hand and you've been sending emails for the whole time we've been sat here. There's somebody out there holding a meeting. There's somebody out there working on a laptop. Something's working here. Understanding what it is important, but understanding what it isn't is how we move forward. And weirdly, that led to one of the longest engagements I've ever had. The point of me saying that is you need influence at the right level.
Yeah.
So you need influence from the top, but then you need to get momentum from the people that do the work, and that's where the community comes in.
I'm reading Justin Robbins. I got an early release, review copy. What do they call it? They call it like early reader's copy, maybe ERC, something like that. My wife gets a lot of them from indie book writers, so I don't get a lot of them. I only had one, and it's Justin's. But he talks about this idea that when you can put values on every whiteboard in every room. You can put, your motto, your mission, and all of these things in every email, and you can ingrain it in how you communicate. But when you stop designing work that that allows the rhythms of your organization to agree that this is what we care about, people lose the commitment. They lose the sense of purpose, because even though we say it, doesn't mean it's true. And the rhythms of the way and the systems that we work in don't necessarily agree, to your point. Like, there's all these things going on. So there are good things, but what are those things? Are those things intentionally designed to derive that outcome that you're talking about? I haven't read all of it, but it is a plug for another author, because it's been really good just thinking about, and the things you're talking. It's like, man, how can organizations get that top down? And is it fair to say, David, that when you have that top down approach to vision and to creating these, systems that allow people to be a part and understand how they're contributing and, having that sense of purpose at work. Is it safe fair to say that community naturally happens when you have that happening?
I think it's genuinely, it doesn't naturally happen, no. It will naturally happen with the people that share the same sentiment, but they'll end up creating an echo chamber, which actually will have it'll have a real good impact at the beginning, and then it'll fade away fast because they'll have that echo chamber of, aren't we brilliant? Haven't we done great? And then that will just
Yeah.
stay as it is. So you do need to bring in those people that aren't so naturally optimistic and aren't so naturally ready for change, and work with them, because that's how you can start to maintain change. So it can definitely grow and evolve and be grown, but it needs to be nurtured. And it also needs to have no hierarchy. So a community,
Mm,
if we use an example that we're all very familiar with, a community should have the service desk analyst who does an incredible job every day and is the closest thing to the business that you have in IT. And it should have the CTO, but there should be no hierarchy in that community. I've worked with a community where the company owner of a large, hundreds if not billions of pound profit company is with the service desk analyst, and has said to me afterwards, I learned more on that call about my business than I ever thought I knew before. And then they don't need to be there every day. They don't need to be there every meeting. They just need to be there enough to be the sponsor and to see the progress. So
yeah.
I've kind of gone a long way of answering your question. Genuinely, I don't think they can just spring up and have success. They need to be nurtured. They need cultivating, and also it's an interesting thing with my role because I'm a consultant. So I am somebody that is usually quite temporary in an organisation. So if I'm there more than 18 months, it's probably going a bit wrong.
Yeah.
If I'm there less than 3 months, it's gone terribly wrong. So there's a bit of a balance. But the point is I can work with organisations to co-create these communities. And you notice I use the word co-create, not create, because it needs somebody from the organisation to maintain and nurture the community. I'm just there to help it along with my experience of other communities.
No, I think that makes sense. That like community doesn't happen on accident, and you you have to make space for it, right? You have to. I think that's where the top down makes a lot of sense. If you don't have somebody in leadership supporting this time together, right? Supporting this brainstorming together, supporting this dialogue, and you know, and not saying really to police it, but to make sure that hierarchy doesn't exist. And I feel like that would be really hard. Remembering my days as an agent, to put me into a room with definitely when I was new, like senior managers and ops managers and CTOs and CIOs, and I, I feel like navigating that would be extremely challenging, right?
Yeah.
To foster that community. But I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you make that work effectively or how you make it safer for those people, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely say there is no hierarchy here, that it's a safe space and so on, but the leader needs to act like it is first and foremost.
Yeah.
But also, and again, when I talk about that person that learned about their business, somebody came into our community meeting, somebody who we delivered services to. And in this particular organisation, their service that they were accountable for was assurance. It was if somebody was abroad and had an accident, they would phone their team and they would need and seek assistance. It might be medical assistance, it could be any level of assistance. And this particular group was frustrated with the quality and the delivery of the IT service, a service that had been delivered 18 months prior under the premise of being more progressive, more user-friendly, exactly what they needed to get their jobs done. And it was none of those things. For a series of design issues and not being human-focused. I'll leave that little bit there. So I said to them, could you come and join the community and explain what you do every day? Don't tell me what's wrong with the service. Just tell us what you do. and then tell us how that impacts what you do. And they came up with this brilliant scenario, and this is where we all learn about the business. They said, if somebody calls my call center from mainland Spain in Europe and they are vomiting and are feeling unwell, it's probably likely they've got food poisoning. Therefore, fortunately, because of the care system, they're not going to need a hospital appointment. They're just going to need to pop to a pharmacy and get what they need. And we'll give them that advice. But if that same phone call comes in from Bogota or from somewhere more remote, somewhere maybe less built up, that could become an airlift scenario. And we need our software to work, because then it's life and death. And that's the importance of what you give us. And you look around the virtual room, including senior members of the organization who were involved in those design decisions and involved in the budget and all that stuff, and you see people go, oh goodness, wow.
Yeah.
And then that then becomes, in this particular case, that then becomes the vehicle to go and deliver improvements. And then that becomes the model to go and deliver improvements. And that's how community can be massive. But it does involve getting people into conversations that they would routinely be uncomfortable with.
Yeah. And I think being able to go to the business and understand, definitely in service management, IT, right? And I know we're doing it more. We're seeing more people talk about the human side of IT, and it's important. But I think the idea that we just now are starting to normalize asking the business, what do you do and how do you do it and how does it impact
It's
things? And
crazy.
like it's wild to me, because I think naturally that's just how I operate. Is like I would like to know that if I don't fix your printer, you're going to lose out on hundreds of millions of dollars, because you're not going to be able to move your train out of the train yard because you need your manifest in order to leave that train out of the train yard. Like, you can't. It's illegal. It's literally like a federal crime for you to leave without that printed piece of paper. Like, or to your point, like, hey, if I get a call from here, I have to airlift versus send somebody to pharmacy. Like, um, the work we do in service management is so meaningful and so impactful,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
we can't design it to improve and increase that impact, whether it's AI, processes, knowledge, or whatever. We can't do anything intentionally design it to make greater impact if we don't understand the impact to begin with that other teams are making, the things that matter to them, you know?
Completely.
Um,
And I think, in terms of our backgrounds, I came from a service desk environment. It was my first job. It's still my favorite job. The ability to speak with somebody every 2 or 3 minutes and help them and make their day a bit better than it was before. I
yeah.
used to love that. I used to buzz off it. I'm not going to lie. I used to love that I could
Yeah.
solve people's problems and, in most cases, but not all, make them happy. And that's something I've taken with me throughout all of my service management and consultancy career, to be able to do that. And I get to do it so much less now, because I don't get a phone call every 2 minutes or 3 minutes,
Yeah.
which I'm kind of thankful for, but also kind of miss. But when you build those communities, and you've seen it with the OSC on a Friday, you still see those light bulb moments, those things of, oh my God, goodness, I didn't think about it like that, or wow, that's really helped me, or sending someone off to their weekend with a bit of a spring in their step. And that's what communities can do.
Yeah.
And I often think we, as service desk or ex-service desk people, we are tuned into that. And therefore, that's why it's so important that we
Yeah.
continue to do what we do, in that kind of guise, no matter our level.
And it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, those light bulb moments still exist. And they're a lot easier to cultivate and have when you are in community, right?
Yeah.
I think as humans, I don't think we grow alone. Like, I mean, I think we don't grow in isolation. You know, we can learn in isolation, but we don't grow, and those are different. Those are
Yeah.
distinct
Really.
things, right? Like, and definitely in service management, man, it's what would it look like if every organization created community intentionally, where people from the business were a part of that, support was a part of that? Like, how much better would our service and support and
Oh,
uh, our experience we provide become?
it's so true. I mean, even now we're writing services and the transition processes without the business. We are
Yeah.
in the nicest possible way, putting together experience levels, often without the business. Why would we suggest what experience they want? That's bonkers as far as I'm concerned. And I've built experience stacks with organizations where they've looked at me like I'm going crazy when I said we need someone from the business to come and look at this, to verify this, to contribute to this. It's interesting to watch. But then when they do come, they're like, why didn't we do that before? And it's just that's how we are. Like you say, we some of us like to learn in isolation. Some of us like to grow through learning in isolation, but I honestly believe we only truly grow when we're amongst others who can help us grow and give us a platform and stimulate us and challenge us. And that's what communities
Yeah.
can do.
Well, we're better together. I know. It's a
Absolutely.
hashtag I use almost all the time.
That's great.
Because I
I
think
love it.
it's so true. We're better together. And
Completely.
yeah. So David, I know we've been talking for 45 minutes or so.
Yeah.
What before I ask you our final send-off question,
Mm.
what is something if you could put every person, every leader in an organization, every person who has any influence where they're at in an organization and communicate something to them, something that's like, hey, if you get this, then everything changes. And what would that be?
Oh, the magic sauce.
Not a softball.
Uh,
Not a softball.
I think I would return to what I was saying earlier, but maybe I'd say it's slightly different around knowledge management. I would ask them to look outwardly into their organization, into their people. And I'd say to them that there is so much tacit knowledge in your organization, in those heads, in those people. And you could lose that on any given day. You might push it out the building, it might walk out the building. So what you need to do is take that knowledge and make it explicit, accessible, and shareable with everyone in your organization. And you do that through great knowledge management and building community to deliver it.
That's so good. And when we listen to this, I need to make sure I notate that so I could use that for our dissemination of that. Because that, man, yeah. How many organizations have lost people with years of experience for whatever reason, and you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. It's like,
It's
oh
crazy.
crap.
If I have 10 seconds for a quick story, I
Yeah,
worked in one
absolutely.
organization. I worked in one organization where we found a guy, let's call him Bob. I always use Bob. Bob had been trying to retire for 8 years because he ran a piece of technology that was out of date. The organization had spent hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to retire this technology, but couldn't because they couldn't find another Bob. And it just took us to say, well, let's get 2 people that can learn from Bob, get them to run it. Then you can let Bob retire, who also is on a massive final salary pension and costing you a lot of money. You can replace him with 2 people who would earn less, but still grow. And then you can move that technology out the building. You can do so with some redundancy in terms of people. And it's not the only time I've seen that. And I think that's where that tacit knowledge being turned into explicit knowledge needs to be incredibly and truly harnessed.
Document everything. We live in a world where AI can make that easier.
Absolutely.
If you rewind even 6 years ago, you'd have to have everybody writing everything out, right? But now, I mean, you have the tools to consume the processes, right? To consume the things you're doing, and tools like Scribe, right? That will literally record your process. What are you doing? Record your screen for you, and spit out an SOP, like in a matter of you doing it once. And now anybody can access that, assuming you're managing your files and feeding it correctly, right? And using those. So,
and that's the accessible. So knowledge is only as good as the people that can find it.
It's true.
So therefore, make sure it's accessible and relevant and time bound.
So, David, I'm going to ask you one final send-off question we ask all of our guests, and it's my favorite question. And unapologetically, I love the answers. But if you could hit rewind and you could talk to young and David, and you pick a time in your life, whether you're 16, 25, whatever, what is one piece of advice or words of wisdom you would give younger David? I
would say to that person, it's not as important as you think it is. Because I've seen in later life things that are really important. And now I'm able to look at things through a different lens. So when somebody says this email is urgent, my first response is, no, it's not. And then I have to get over that. But I guess the true point is we operate in a space, in a period of our career, and mine was my late 20s, where I felt like the world was on my shoulders and I acted like it, and it wasn't good for me. So I would say to that person, it's not that important. You're doing a good job, and go home and relax. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that probably hindered me more than helped me.
Let the weight of the world go. It's not, you don't have to be perfect. You're doing a good job. I love that. And I'm sure somebody's listening to that, man. And this is why I love this question, because I'm sure someone, that's like, we all need to hear that in moments of our lives. Like, it's not that important. Like, no, that's good. That's good. Well, David, where can they catch you? Where can they check out our audience? Check out your stuff. Where can they find your book? All that jazz. Give us the plug. Where can they connect with you?
The books are everywhere. So most commonly Amazon, but you can go to Barnes and Noble in the States. There's Amazon. We've got Waterstones over here in the UK. That if you just type in the names of the books and my name, you'll find them. Or you can come to my LinkedIn, which I know we'll be advertising during the promotion for this episode, but it's a Soul 7 Studio. You can go to www.soul7studio.com, but I would ask you to go to www.allyshipactually.com, which is the book on allyship that I penned with Lucy, and I'll try and not use the profanity OSH exclamation mark T. I've got bowelcancer.com to find the book on the bowel cancer journey.
Oh, David, appreciate your time. We appreciate you staying up late for us, and my delay of setting up an office, which I should have waited. And, you're just so patient and a genuinely wonderful human to talk to. And we probably will have you on at some point in the future to talk more about the things that you're doing, because we can keep talking. So thank you. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Catch you on the next episode of Bites and Banter.
Be the superhero of your organization. Unleash your IT powers at HDI Service and Support World, May 3rd to 7th in Las Vegas. Dive into actionable insights, cutting-edge training, and unbeatable networking. From solving today's challenges to shaping the future of service and support, this is your chance to make IT legendary. Suit up and save big with $500 off using code BANTER500 on HDIconference.com.